The governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, is never afraid of taking decisions, no matter how unpopular. On Friday, Governor El-Rufai inaugurated an Interfaith Preaching Regulatory Council aimed at stemming religious conflicts in the states. The governor said religion must not be used for economic exploitation nor crisis. Let's hear from him.
Most of the people of Kaduna State are very religious, like other Nigerians. But Kaduna State is unfortunately one of the states in the country with a sad history of religious clashes. The personal exercise of faith and the better conduct and character that spirituality promotes helps society to progress. But religion has unfortunately been weaponized so much that something that should bring God's creatures closer together in a common awareness of our moral frailties has become a device to question the right of some of God's creatures to even exist at all, let alone practice their faith or live wherever they wish. It was in 1984, Your Royal Highness, members of the Council, that the government of Air Vice Marshal Usman Mazu enacted the Religious Preaching Edict to address this matter. This edict was not only enacted in Kaduna State, but in all the northern states of Nigeria. Subsequent military governors, like the government of Colonel Hamid Ali, amended the edict to increase the penalty imposed for violation of its provisions. So this is a law that has always been in the statute books of Kaduna State and indeed other states, but has not been implemented faithfully. We decided in 2016 to review this edict and subject the revised law to the scrutiny of an elected legislature for the first time. We have now a religious preaching law, and we are determined to do our best to help stamp out the poison from the negative practices of religion. Religion is a relationship with God, not a bargaining tool for economic or political favors, and certainly not an excuse for murder, arson, destruction of property and other violent crimes against people who worship and pray differently. As people of faith, we all believe we are worshiping one God, even though we worship Him in different ways. So why would people that believe they are worshiping the same God kill each other because of these differences? Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, as pioneer members of this Religious Preaching Regulatory Council, you have an arduous but most important task of ensuring that those that are leaders of faith, those that preach, do not set our people against each other, and that faith is not practiced in ways that deliberately and consistently inconvenience others. I wish you the best in helping our state to enter a new era where people can remain as religious as they choose to be, but with religion removed as a trigger for violent conflict. I want to assure Your Highness and members of this council that the Kaduna State Government will do everything it can to support you to do your job and help our state to determine those that are qualified by education and training to preach our two major religions without causing any problems for our people and our communities.
Yep, Governor Nasir El-Rufai there, inaugurating the Interfaith Preaching Regulatory Council.
Yes.
What is this?
The governor first talked about this before his re-election, and a lot of the preachers were up in arms against him. They saw no reason why we should have a situation in which their preaching will be regulated. But in a volatile state like Kaduna, where a preacher could cause real violence to happen by the content of his preaching, the governor does not see any reason why we shouldn't have this. So, and as he said, people have been weaponizing religion and using it as a trigger for violence. So he's saying that religion must be practiced in a manner that will not inconvenience others. I agree totally. For example, if you are my neighbor and you are fond of making noise through your loudspeakers, you know, conducting a vigil within your church and not allowing your neighbors to sleep.
And you have external
That's noise pollution, and noise pollution is something that government should frown against. So El-Rufai is saying that, look, if you practice your religion in a manner that inconveniences others, then you are liable to face the law. So there are some aspects of this law already that I am pleased about. Having lived in the north, I know how influential clerics are. Sometimes a cleric can say something, and the people will not look back, they will take to violence. So we've got to do something, but at the same time, there is freedom of practice of one's religion. So as long as you do not infringe on the right of the people to practice the religion the way they deem fit, then it is a welcome development.
Why are they? A lot of people will look at this as trying to, you know, gag men of God from both sides.
I think if you look at it on its face value, most likely you will see it as an infringement on freedom of religious expression, which is a fundamental human right. But when you look at the objective and subjective conditions in Kaduna State, and if you have the opportunity of going through the bill, you understand that there is a good motive. And we have to look at the history of that bill. It was not originated by El-Rufai. It actually came into being around 1984 through a military that was put in place by Air Commodore Muazu, who was the then military administrator. Because in 1984 there was a Maitesene riot, and it impacted greatly on most northern states. And they realized that, you know, religious leaders were instrumental in what they preach. They would preach cases, they would go on the street, you know, condemning other people's religion. So they had that edit in 1984, and they stipulated a lot of guidelines. You cannot play inciting religious tones on the streets. You cannot use abusive religious language. You cannot condemn other people's religion by describing people as infidels. You know, and then a lot of things. And then if you are a preacher coming from outside, you need to be licensed before you can, you know. So it started in 84. And I think in 1987, then Colonel Maro also, in fact, made it more stiffer, you know, introduced 2 years imprisonment and all that. And in 1996, Ahmed Ali, who is now a customs, was the minister administrator, he also, you know, in fact, he said they will license people and after 6 months they will renew it. So I think El-Rufai is trying to borrow from, you know, the historical conditions that we have found ourselves, meaning that nothing really has changed. The situation is getting worse in Kaduna State. So there should be a kind of the need for regulation. And if you look at that bill, I think it's a bit inclusive because it involves Khan, it involves Jamaatul Islam, Izala movement. All of them are supposed to be the one to license the preacher. So it's not as if it's the governor that will license them. So I think it's a very good development if it is not used for political reasons. In terms of its concept, I think, and given the situation in Kaduna State, I think we need something like that.
All right.